If you're over the age of 25 and like watching gaming videos on YouTube, and I hope you do because you're watching gaming content right now, you must have seen at least one episode of Angry Video Game Nerd. A running theme with that series is that there was a publisher called LJN that flooded the NAS with games that were mediocre at best, usually just terrible. Because of AVGN, the idea that LJN equals bad became popularized. In some circles, it became popular to call certain companies the LJN of so-and-so console. For Master System, I've seen Brazilian gamers say US Gold is just that, but who the heck is US Gold? US Gold is a company well known by European and Brazilian gamers usually over the age of 30. Like LJN, they didn't develop the games themselves, they just published them. And like LJN, they were cursed with the reverse Midas touch. Everything they slapped their logo on turned into trash. If you think the irony of the company name ends there, they were not located in the United States. US Gold was a British publisher. In reality, US Gold was founded with the intention of importing games from US and selling them in Europe. Hence the name, as in gold from US, with the gold being their awful games imports. What started as simply bringing American games and selling them for a relatively cheap price turned into deals with publishers like Sega and Capcom, outsourcing development to studios like Epix and Probe, and releasing versions of popular games to home computers. I guess technically they are the LJN of computers popular in Europe at the time, like the Amiga, but I have very little knowledge or experience about how bad or good the games they released on home computers were. What I do know is that they made a lot of money around the mid-80s, decided they would just flood the market with hundreds of releases, quantity over quality as it were. The Master System is known to have been supported with decent games past the Sega Genesis launch in locations like Brazil and Europe, but pretty much all of Sega's own internal teams changed focus to the Game Gear and the Mega Drive itself. This meant it was up to third-party companies and outsourced studios to keep the underdog system alive. As far as I know, in the end, they didn't actually release tons of games and conversions, thankfully. And for some reason in '96 I just bought them. Why did they do that? Anyway, that essentially put an end to US Gold's reign of terror. It's time to make a bad decision and check out every single US Gold game published on the Master System. Like I said, they were a British publisher and their target territory was in Europe. However, many of their SMS games saw release in Brazil with a little help from Tectoy, this one-trick pony company that distributed Sega hardware here in the past, and to this day does nothing but flood the market with terrible Master System emulation boxes that nobody wants. Gee, thanks Tectoy. Are US Gold's Master System games really all that terrible? Let's find out. First off, we have Impossible Mission. I couldn't tell if it's based on the movie or a TV show or what. The only Impossible Mission I know is the one starring Tom Cruise. Let's just say this game has nothing to do with that one. Instead, what you get is a game that looks a lot like Zillion. At least on the surface. The corridors and elevator shafts leading to one-screen rooms where you have to search objects with a computer where you can put a password to deactivate security are all here. Unlike in Zillion, there is no shooting. You're supposed to find puzzle pieces scattered around in the many rooms and figure out how to piece them together in a very clunky menu. You don't have lives. Every time you die, you lose 10 minutes of the 12-hour time limit you have to beat the game. This is a conversion of a Commodore 64 game. It probably plays better on computers. As for this version, the weird jumping that is hard to control, the distance for, and the slow menu browsing just kills the fun in all honesty. The rooms being randomly generated is definitely an impressive feature for its time. I also should note that Zillion came out in '87, which might make this '84 game a source of inspiration. I suppose that increases its historical value. Next, Summer Games, a conversion of another Commodore 64 game made by Epix. I didn't actually play the computer versions, but on a glance this seems to be a faithful looking conversion. I'm gonna be honest, I think anything that isn't just plain old baseball, football and tennis just doesn't work well in systems that only have 2 or 3 face buttons. Every event works like a minigame, each with their own control scheme varying from simple to learn like sprinting to unnecessarily convoluted like diving. Even looking up the instructions, which the game does not provide, I still can't make any sense of the diving event at all. US Gold published a lot of games similar to this one, and believe it or not, this is one of the few I consider playable. Alright, next is Gauntlet. Wait, really? This can't be that bad. And it really isn't. This is a conversion of an ancient arcade game where you pick a character based on a class and explore countless mazes filled with treasure, food, and monsters. Monsters spawn very quickly, so sometimes it's better to just focus on reaching the exit instead of trying to destroy every enemy in their spawn tiles. You can shoot projectiles or just bump ahead to deal melee damage, which will drain some of your health. There is basically no visual feedback for when you take damage other than your health decreasing, so it can be easy to lose a lot without realizing until you get used to it. I'm no Gauntlet expert, but this one plays okay. I can't tell the difference between the characters other than their amount of health. Even their projectiles look the same to me. It's incredibly hard to go very far in the game, but that's just how classic Gauntlet is, especially only one player. I don't know if I'd recommend this version of their other conversions or the original arcade game. I can imagine it must have been really cool to be able to play Gauntlet in your Master System if that was the only system you had. Looks better than the NES version at least. Road Games. This is basically a spiritual successor to Summer Games, and it plays much worse. The theme is a bit more festive, so instead of sport events, you have a lot of mini-games of the kind you'd see in some annual festival. Each is based on tradition from different countries, and the game does have a neat presentation trying to tell you about their origin. It fades to black faster than you can read though. The graphics are a lot more colorful than Summer Games, and that's the only good thing I have to say about it. The minigames could not be less intuitive to control. Just don't bother with this one. Ace of Aces. Sweet, it's gotta be a rail shooter. Oh no. A combat flight simulator. On the Master System? This feels absolutely horrible to control. You use the D-pad to move the cursor and interact with the hundreds of switches and buttons in all the panels. I don't care for flight scenes at all, so my view is very biased. I got bored of this in less than a minute and had more fun figuring out the quickest way to make the plane crash. According to critics at the time this was a new release, it was not very accurate for a simulator and the graphics did not impress like the Commodore 64 original. I usually don't just let other critics speak for me, but they probably know more than me about this subject matter. If you're into combat flight scenes, I guess you could check this one out through alternative means so you don't waste your hard-earned cash. Although from the sounds of things, only Commodore version is worth playing. Leaderboard, also known as Road Class Leaderboard. The original was a highly acclaimed golf simulator for European home computers. It also had a good conversion for DOS. Try to remember this is a 1986 game and might see how this would be considered very advanced. Even playing it now, I was surprised by how immersive it felt for an 8-bit golf game. I'm very curious about the technique they used to render the courses in all these different angles without screwing up the distance. I was more surprised by how it controlled. I didn't quite figure out the best way to do closer shots properly and found judging the power per distance for putting very tricky, but overall, I actually had fun trying Leaderboard. Increasing the difficulty seems to add more complexity to the game. Also, if there are threes in the course, the rendering process takes an eternity. This is mostly a novelty, but it's still a solid pick if you want to do some golfing in your SMS. California Games. I actually remember liking this version. This one got a North American release, by the way. Historically, this was one of Epic's most successful games of the late 80s, but oh boy has this aged worse than I remember. California Games is a crash course on janky, unintuitive controls. Aside from Footbag, which is still plagued by atrocious hit detection, nothing makes any sense. Characters trip and fall off at the tiniest of mistakes. It's hard to do anything remotely cool which you're supposed to do to increase your score because you're too busy trying to avoid getting eaten by sharks or hitting your chin on hard concrete. I don't know what my younger self was thinking. This is hot trash. Maybe try one of the other 1,000 conversions. Advanced Dungeons & Dragons: Heroes of the Lands. As the name says, it's based on Advanced Dungeons & Dragons campaign. You have 8 characters which you can only control one at a time, each with their own health, some which can cast magic spells and others which are better off just fighting with their weapons. What can I say about this one? The graphics are an eyesore. It's hard to describe how bad the controls are. It looks like a 2D game, but the way it works is if you move to the left or right until the compass shows a cardinal direction highlighted in red, then you turn to that direction and move to a different area. To dash forward you have to hold up in the D-pad, and attacking enemies from close range seems to be a combination of mashing the button and pushing the D-pad to their direction. It's really hard not to take damage while you're fighting anything. To use spells, you have to open a menu that takes the whole screen, then select the spell. The visual cue of the spells is so minimalistic, it took me a while to notice that menu was doing anything. To pick up items, you also have to use that same menu. Everywhere looks the same, and you see your whole party die before you get anywhere. Just forget this conversion exists. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, the action game. This almost reached North America, but those plans were cancelled. There is a prototype of that release up there, not that it matters. This is truly the holy grail, the cream of the crap. On top of being one of the ugliest masters in the games I have ever seen, the controls, oh my god, nothing works the way it should in this game. Something as simple as climbing ropes is finicky because Indy's sweaty hands make the grip very slippery. The jump itself is very floaty. The whip basically requires ammo to function. Since every enemy has more range than you, it doesn't help much. You can't even avoid being shot since your action feels delayed and your hitbox is huge. I can't tell you how good the game gets because I couldn't make it past the first section. Oh, and the ceiling damages you in the first level. California Games. Chew. I never heard of this version. This can't be a good sign. It so happens to be similar to the Mega Drive version, which I have seen videos of years ago on YouTube. It's very close to that version, and that's not a good thing. You get a smaller selection of horrible events to choose from, with a menu featuring some flickery beach bro douchebag pointing his finger instead of a normal cursor. The sequel to California Games manages to play way worse than the first. The snowboard event gives you very little time to react to incoming obstacles. Landing the freaking helicopter is a minigame itself and the landing just refuses to work sometimes. Surfing was replaced with whatever this is. I don't know if I'm supposed to figure out how to stand up and surf or if I should just try avoid hitting people, which seems impossible. The hang glider has some potential, but keeping yourself afloat long enough isn't easy either. You're also guaranteed to always mess up your first attempt because the screen controls transition is so sudden. I don't usually swear in my videos, but I just want to make my point about this and the first game very clear. California Games. Turns out this only came out in Europe, and that's why I hadn't heard of it. Strider 2. Oh no, the original Strider already had an infamously bad SMS version. And in my opinion, this is even worse. Obviously, with no relation to the real Capcom developer Strider 2, this is a game with boring, flat, and repetitive level design with no rhyme or reason, full of blind jumps leading straight to enemy fire, and worse production quality than that bad Strider 1 port everyone is familiar with. Strider's jump is almost as hard to control as the guy from Impossible Mission. Not being hit is basically impossible, but developers were aware of this because you find health pickups very often. Sometimes Strider will throw shurikens, other times he will slash with his sword. It just feels very random to me. Skip this one. Even if you fancy play games known for being trash, you'd probably get bored. James Bond 2. Alright, this should be interesting, an old Eurogame classic. After so much dumpster fire, this feels like a breath of fresh air. James Bond is a series of games starring a goldfish that found some success in Amiga computers and received ports on various consoles. Despite what the cover art suggests, there is no gunfire involved. It's a very standard side-scrolling platform where you jump on enemies to defeat them and collect items to increase your score and recover some health. There is a hub road you navigate to enter doors that lead to the actual levels, kinda like Kirby's Adventure. Bond can stretch upwards seemingly indefinitely until reaching a ceiling which you can then grab on. This helps backtracking out of deep spots when you can just jump all the way up. Much like many other Eurogame platformers of the 90s, there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason for why levels look the way they do, or what kind of objects you collect for points, or even any thought put into what enemies are supposed to look like. Everything is just really random. Thankfully, there aren't any droplets of water falling down to damage you. The acceleration physics are also very weird. This isn't a bad game, it's usually very laid back, but what ruins it a bit for me is the amount of leaps of faith it expects from you. I really wanted to show you footage of later levels, but the last level of the first world kept sending me back to the beginning over and over. Outrun Europa. Despite the name, this has very little to do with Outrun. It's a bit more like Spy Hunter meets Road Rash, but doesn't do anything as good as either of those two. That doesn't mean it's outright bad. You start on a bike, but the type of vehicle you ride changes with every level. The controls and objectives stay the same, reach the end before the time limit, pick the path you're told, and try to beat as many enemies as possible without getting killed. It's important to collect the shield, turbo, and ammo pickups along the way, since from the second level onwards both time and incoming damage get really tight. If you stare too long at the scenery around you moving almost like a slideshow, you could make your eyes and head hurt, but you really should be focused on the road if you want to survive. I feel like if you take your time at this game, you might find some decent action on wheels. Olympic Gold. And we're back to more crappy sports simulators. I really don't have much to say about this one. Olympic Gold is like Summer Games 2. The presentation is way better, you got some new events, and it's an official Barcelona 92 Olympic Games video game. I'm gonna be real, at this point I was very tired of these US Gold sport event games, so I admit I didn't try very hard to learn how to play. Because I got tired of having to learn from scratch every time, especially with some of them being more complex than before, like the springboard diving. The production quality is definitely there, and for masters in the game, it does the job of being a competent simulator. This is a conversion of a Mega Drive game of the same name, which is probably better than this version. Championship Hockey. They sure love their sports games. Europe exclusive release. The computer is terrible, it's very easy to score, every player looks like they're constantly shaking from the cold weather. If you want to play a hockey game on the Master System, I think Great Icy Hockey plays better. This one just doesn't run well at all. And that's really all I have to say about it. Super Kickoff. There is one thing I want from any football game I play, and that is for keeping the ball in front of me not to feel like a chore. This game failed in doing that, which immediately took me out of the experience. This is one of those football games where you can't miss the ball if you turn to a different direction, and I swear shooting for the goal doesn't quite follow the direction you aim for. The computer has some funny fixation with trying to injure your players and getting penalized for some reason. Winter Olympics. Yet another one. The presentation is a step back from Olympic Gold with some weird looking kids showing up in the menu and carrying the Olympic torch. Again, I was so done with these games that my patience was running thin. The first event was alright, I still don't know what you're supposed to do to reach the finish line fast enough, but it wasn't too bad. Unfortunately, I gave up during the second event. Because I had so much trouble with the controls, I got literally stuck in a bunch of trees. I'd rather be playing Nagano Winter Olympics on the N64. Star Wars. This game got trashed on AVGN among other YouTube videos. Well, the NAS version anyway, which this game is a conversion of. This is another game where I had trouble avoiding being shot at by certain enemies. It's based on A New Hope as the intro suggests, and you take control of Luke Skywalker, carrying a blaster. You can unlock other characters from the movie like Leia, Han Solo and Obi-Wan. Unfortunately, the map you're meant to navigate to find the other characters is very confusing, so I ended up leaving Tatooine without assembling everyone the first time. Gotta say, the fact you can do that is kinda impressive, it makes it more open-ended than most games at the time. You really shouldn't do that though, because that prevents you from playing as those characters. The graphics are alright with enough colors and detail at times, it really depends on what area you're in. This is a game with a few cool ideas, like all the skippable exploration and upgrades you can get. It could have been a decent action side-scroller if it wasn't for the extremely slippery dash feature that you have to use to make it across many of the platforming sections, the blind jumps and falls the game expects you to do, and enemies colliding with you before you can see them coming. If you try playing this on Jedi difficulty, good luck, you're gonna need it. On top of the cheap level design and bad feel of the controls, this difficulty increases the number of enemies and adds fall damage. Even if you're a huge Star Wars fan, this game is not worth it. Road Rash. An excellent conversion of the original Road Rash. The scenario looks a bit like Vomit and it runs a bit choppy, but that's that's just how Road Rash is. The real flaw with this version is that it's very hard to hit opponents. I don't know if it's just me, but the reach of your punches is short and it's like you gotta be frame perfect to hit someone. Winning the races gets you money which you can spend in better bikes. I imagine completely destroying opponents gets you more money because 3 races later I still couldn't afford an upgrade. By impressive conversion, I don't think there's a reason to play this over the Mega Drive version. Still, if you like Road Rash, I can't see why you wouldn't have a bit of fun with it. The Incredible Hulk. Only marginally better than the Indiana Jones The Last Crusade action game, this terrible game puts you in control of the green Mr. Hyde from the Marvel comics. Hulk is very slow and it takes too many hits to kill a single enemy. They will follow you to the ends of hell to see you dead if you try to ignore them. It's also easy to miss their attacks, which have a very short reach to begin with. Sometimes enemies show up with long-range weapons, in which case you're basically doomed. The game designers thought it was clever to put underground tunnels you can crawl through as Bruce Banner. They are completely worthless since you still have to go back up and get killed right after. Bruce can use gun pickups, but trust me, you're just going to die. That's all you do in this game. Hulk doesn't smash. Hulk dies. And finally, World Cup USA 94, the last game in this list. What a way to end their Master System career, another sports game. One with the most ungodly and confusing menu I've ever seen in a video game. The designer of the menu must have thought they were breaking some kind of new ground with this. There are no words to tell what each option does. No clear icons. There is only dog. This is a game that requires a menu just to understand what's going on with the options, which are many. I spent some time doing what I thought was selecting my team, then when the match started, I was playing as a completely different country. I mean, let me correct that. I wasn't even playing! Somehow I ended up configuring the game to just play some kind of exhibition match for me, computer versus computer. Look, maybe you're someone who played this game and had fond memories of it, in which case, I'm sorry, but I can tell you I don't have a menu with me, and a game that can even show you a readable menu isn't a game I'll ever recommend to anyone. So there you have it. A few games in the mix were actually decent, but overall not a pleasant experience. There are way too many pointless conversions and trash games in this list. I guess the reputation is well deserved. Wish they had more games that weren't just sports simulators, because my energy for those ran out really quickly. In the end, their Master System list was way shorter than the list of games they published on European computers. I said I'd check every single SMS release, but I'm not entirely sure I covered all of them. If you think I missed any other US Gold release, let me know in the comments. Thanks for accompanying me in this little journey, and as always, thanks for watching.